Aloha, my name is Joe Laceby, and this is Ka Lae. This is my show. I'm going to go through each piece and talk about it, and the rest will be up to you. So let's begin. The first piece is actually the first storyline, basically. This involves a place down at South Point on the Big Island of Hawaii. And this is a picture of what they call a goat tree down there. It's off in pasture land, and there's goats that live under it. I consider this symbolic of the whole show, as the goat tree represents a safe place for the goats to be. It's a sanctuary for them. And the unusual growth of the trees due to the high winds that blow constantly down there. So it's the shape of it is very protective, like a shelter. And the shape of it was also very kind of interesting. So not only did it turn out to be a good image in the cyanotype format, it turned into be quite a symbolic image too for the shelter and for the goats. Yeah. This frame is also made especially for all the cyanotypes in the show. This is a handcrafted metal frame, and it kind of complements the blue tone of the print very well, I think. We move into some of the intaglio prints. This one up here is called Signs. It is actually petroglyphs that are down at the South Point area at the very end, connected almost to the ocean. They're in a small tide pool, only visible during low tide. These signs were carved a long time ago, and they represent what I believe to be whales out there. But when I was down there, I kind of took it as they represent an alien type form. There's 3 of them in there. And based on that type of style that they crafted it in, I took that style and kind of expanded on a little bit for the aliens and how their body shape is. But I kept the same type of flowing lines for it. This is a solar print, and it's an intaglio solar print. And it's encased in plexiglass. Right below it, it's another version of the tree, the goat tree. It's called Pre-Dawn at the Goat Tree. And it's another solar plate. It's a 2-plate, 2-color process. And of course, up here on the top right will be the aliens as well. And they're engraved upon the emulsion that's on the solar plate. It was quite the process to make this. From here, the shelter, you can still see the goat silhouette forms underneath. And the aliens are now coming into the picture, observing or seeing what's going on. And there's even some in the very background there, cruising across the landscape. This next piece, this is called the Sentinel. It's another solar plate. It's actually a little larger than these. It's about the same size. But there's a variety of windmills down there, and there's an old abandoned windmill farm as well. That they no longer work, but when the wind blows hard enough, they'll be turning, and there's no oil or anything in them, so they make a kind of screeching, kind of moaning noise all night long. I called it the Sentinel because I believe, they stand kind of as an icon over the landscape, and I'll talk about them later as we go along, but they're really tall, they're very kind of monolithic. When you're up close to them, they have a very large presence right there. And when they start making that noise, it carries pretty far. This is also encased in plexiglass. And this print, the next cyan, this is called Signs. And it's similar to the other smaller version of it, but I did a cyanotype of the same image. So you can see the forms as well. They're carved into the tide pool area, and the water is actually receded back into this area, and the ocean is just right on the other side of this rock outcropping. I wanted to present it in a larger format to get just more of an emotional feeling out of it. And with the cyanotype process of turning everything blue and white, I think it produces kind of a solemn mood about it. Moving into these two. These are 2 zinc plate intaglios. The top one's called the Calling. This has a form here that represents the backside of one of the aliens. And this is an alien's point of view down at the landscape here. In front of him is a kind of a horn type shape. And I call it the Ka Lae because he's making some sort of noise through the horn out across the landscape, which is represented by some hills and some kind of, like I said, the monolithic aspect of that windmill. I produced the same type of kind of tall cylindrical structures that are skinny and elongated. So right here, actually, is also the goat tree, and there's a couple of goats under there as well. So the Ka Lae is going across the landscape. The goats are running for shelter underneath the goat tree. And there's an actually a form coming up here, a well, from the goat tree that's somewhat symbolic of something coming back, a soul or something coming up to check out what's going on up here with the aliens. Below that, this is called the prophet. I named this the prophet because also in this environment there's cows, and they're somewhat solitary. So you see them out along the horizon and just kind of doing their own thing. This is it's right up against the cliffside here with the barbed wire fences that surround it. And off to the bottom here actually is a pile of old rocks, but they're actually kind of in that alien form down at the bottom there. I call it the prophet because I believe maybe the cow was part of the prophet down there. The goats didn't have anything, but the cow had some old knowledge. He was a bigger guy. This is called the talisman. This is metal that was handcrafted, heated up and forged. On the top part is some of the barbed wire. As within the prophet, the barbed wire closes off areas and it keeps things in a way. This was a found object down there at the area, and it was already looped and had been sitting a long time, so it gathered up a lot of rust from the ocean air and the salt. And I, kind of balanced that against a really highly polished, steel structure that had a lot of kind of whimsical twists and turns to it. I call it the talisman because I believe it's more of a round kind of halo type shape, where it lends itself to amulet or a medallion or something of a spiritual nature. And the talisman is usually a protecting type form or object or relic, and I believe this could possibly be something like that. The goat tree, of course, is part of the form for the back here. And it's just a flat piece of plywood coated in black. And I wanted it to be a central balancing point between both sides of the show, and as a central figure for anyone walking into the main gallery, they're instantly going to see this first. And directly in front of them, they will be viewing this rock here. There's a lot of lava rock on the island, and at South Point, there's a lot of outcroppings of it. And because it's so south, there's not a lot of rainfall down there. So I collected dead grass, and it'll always be dead down there for the most part. So I created a little central piece to kind of take you to that area. This is called the collection. This is a koa carving out of the native koa wood here on the island. It shows part of one of the aliens curved around, and it also has a tall version of one of the aliens in an upright position with some sort of tendrils or collection devices that's coming up across the horizon here. With, of course, I repeat these tall things. You see them on all my prints, and they're going to be power devices that emanate or radiate some sort of energy. They're also they represent a power line structure, man structure, but these aren't connected to each other, so they operate on their own, really. And right up here, this is called a collection. This is an intaglio version of the sculpture. It's a 2D version. And here you can also see the tall cylindrical part of the alien, and of course the goats, which the aliens are there to gather. This piece next to it, it's called the hatching. Both similar processes, intaglio etchings. This shows basically the hatching of the aliens. It shows them coming up, very very vertical, a lot of movement just going up in this piece as it comes up to their kind of balloon bulbous shaped heads. And I believe once the collection happened, they were able to now produce more and spawn. And that is what this is. This next piece is a cyanotype. It's called the flow. And here I incorporated the tall windmills. Then this particular one in the middle has no blades on it. They had fallen off at one point. And the aliens are hanging out in front of these. The windmill is creating a flow of wind or an energy flows through and into these aliens. Like fish in a stream, they just stay put right there. It's also kind of a watching alien up here with a smaller version, possibly like a leader or so. And across the horizon line, I go back and repeat some of these tall cylindrical power units, power poles, basically. And even on the side, there's much larger versions of them. Something I always go back to. This next piece is called the extinction. This is another windmill. It's a solar plate, but it just represents something big that happened, and now it's over. Possibly the aliens took everything there was, and the land became desolate and barren, and nothing else lived there anymore. This bottom one, this is called Alien but Primitive, but it's not really titled. I have a Shinko-laid some newsprint upon it that just gives it a kind of self-explanatory title, really. And it, of course, is the windmills again. And I've etched in some landscape with the aliens up on top here. This piece is called The Witness. It represents mankind. Once the aliens have come and taken everything, he was probably the last survivor, last witness to the destruction, to what happened there. And once again, I repeat back to these long power line cross type shapes. But, this piece is a cyan, but it came from an actual drawing that I did and turned it into a cyanotype. So, and I've come in and hand-colored watercolor into it to push and pull and bring some different things out. And this last piece, this is called the Genesis. Genesis meaning a sort of rebirth, but I wouldn't say it's so much of a rebirth in a good way. It's, the aliens here are obviously present. There's really no goats under the tree. There's kind of a burnt feeling to it. And it flows off into another form of the landscape and brings you back around, back into the background again. This is the final print because this is as far as I could see it going. This is where I ended it. So that's my show. And, hope you enjoyed it.